Tyler in Georgia. How's it going, man?
It's going good, Dave. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, my pleasure. So I really liked your submission. And let's just start off. You've got an interesting background here, but you just spent a couple years in the military.
Yes, I have. I was in the U.S. Air Force for 6 years, and it was a great time, and I just recently got out.
Yeah, so you were in from 19 to 25. You are 25 years old right now. And,
26, just turned 26.
Oh, 26. All right, happy birthday.
Thank you.
Why did you go into the Air Force? What made you make the decision to go into the military?
So if you don't mind, I'll give a little backstory of my life, just real quick synopsis.
Yeah,
so I'm born in South Carolina, in Charleston, South Carolina. My mother was a crack addict. I was put into adoption. The people I were adopted to, they later on adopted me later in my life. And as I got older, I realized that there wasn't really a chance for me to go to college for what I was trying to do. All their money gave to their blood daughter, and I had no chance of getting into college. So my best chance was to go into the military, get a GI Bill, and then make it from there.
Yeah. So you mentioned you were adopted later. Do you mind me asking how old you were when you were adopted?
I was adopted when I was I'd say about 11, 12 years old.
And before that, were you sort of bouncing around foster families, or what do you remember about that part of life?
So the earliest I remember, I was about 5 years old, and I lived on a farm when I was in foster care. And then I moved back in with my mother. And then later on, at about 7 years old, I got put back into the foster care system. And then from then on, I was in the foster care system, bounced around from 2 houses, then moved in with my adopted parents, and I lived with them until I was 18 years old.
Yeah. From what you can remember, I mean, I know it's a young age, but what was your feel? What was it like to be a young child that age and bouncing around from house to house? I know you only know one life, but what did that feel like?
When I think about it in the moment, I really don't have any feelings of what I was thinking at the time. I was just a kid. I didn't really think anything of it. I just thought I was moving from house to house. I thought that's how every kid lived their life at the time. As I grew older, I was part of 4 brothers. We got split into 2. My oldest and my youngest, they went somewhere else. And me and the middle brother, we lived together. And he kind of taught me the ropes of what was going on with life.
Yeah. So then you do the 5 years or so, 6 years in the U.S. Air Force. And now one of the things that you wanted to talk about was race and politics, because your personal politics aren't exactly what somebody might think if they were just to judge you by looking at you, which obviously I don't do. But tell me a little bit about your political ethos right now.
Yeah. So if I had to put myself on a spectrum, I'm a little bit to the right of Attila the Hun. So a lot of people don't realize it, or they look at me and think that I'm probably a liberal because I'm black. But what a lot of people don't get is a lot of black people are more conservative than they put on. They just have some liberal leanings because the Democrat Party, as it came through the 80s and 90s, they put on more of this show of, we're here for civil rights, and which I get. But growing up black, you're basically branded with the D sign as soon as you're born. And when I got into the military, a lot of that changed me, because when I was about between those ages of 19 and 25, those are the times where you're the most moldable. And I wasn't going to college, so I wasn't being influenced by the propaganda that was going on in the college at the time. So my outlook on life was a bit different from a lot of people of my race and of my age. So I'm somebody who thinks about pulling myself up by the bootstraps. That's something I really believe in. And I've made it my way through it without having to depend on the government, basically.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. I guess I never thought of it like that, that in a way you escaped that indoctrination of the college years because you went into the Air Force. That's kind of great in a way. So you see this now. So what's right to you? What does being right mean to you?
So being right to me, a lot of this comes from the Gamergate years. I know you've had a couple people on that talked about Gamergate, and that was the real trigger for me. I had some things that kind of were like, hey, I'm not really with the Democrat Party on that. But it was Gamergate for me. When they started to come at the video game, I'm an avid gamer. This is how I probably suppressed some of my depression as I was younger with what I had to go on, not seeing my mother or father throughout my younger lives. And video games was my escape. And when I started to see the media start to try to put their tentacles into it and try to put their, I'm not even going to say liberal, I'm going to say, as you put it, regressive propaganda into the medium, that's when I started to really push back against that.
Yeah, did you ever think that you were going to have a political reaction related to video games? Because to me, that's what made Gamergate so bananas. It's an escape for so many people, a wonderful escape, as you said, to not have to deal with certain things or not have to be depressed about a certain thing. And then next thing you know, I like tentacles also, because that's what it was. They just jumped in on this thing, and something kind of terrible happened. Although now I would argue that some goodness has come out of it.
Yes, it's kind of sad to an extent, because a lot of people who I would have probably been on the same side with, I don't like to see injustice, racism, and things like that. But as somebody who I avidly follow now, Ben Shapiro put it, show me where the racism is at, and I will fight it with you. If you cannot just say it's a systematic thing, you have to show me where it's at. We'll attack it together, get rid of it. Then after that, then we may have our differences of opinion from there.
Yeah. So you basically, from what I sense, is you hate identity politics. You want to be judged as yourself, and you see no use in it. Amongst friends and coworkers, things like that. Do you get judged for that? Because that's one of the themes that I get from a lot of my audience, is that they're afraid, if they're a little out of the mainstream, they're afraid to say it.
I do. Matter of fact, I have a roommate. She's more of a pro-black, more along with Black Lives Matter than I am. I personally do not like Black Lives Matter because the propaganda that they put out. A lot of this goes deep into the weeds of Black Lives Matter, with going into looking what their websites say and things of that nature, which I won't get into. But they do not focus on trying to actually help out the Black community. What they want to do is separate us from the police, where I think that in these areas such as Chicago and New York and all these places that need more policing, they ask for less. And that's the wrong way to go for that. I'm not saying that we need a police state. However, we do need more police in these areas to try to help out the downtrodden, because the number one killer of Black men is Black men, which is a problem.
So when you get into arguments with friends and things, and I've had a bunch of people, Larry Elder, who changed my views on a lot of this, really, and who lays out stat. Yeah. So and if you watch my first interview with him, I said something about his systemic racism, and he basically just clubbed me over the head, and it did change me. It really did, because facts, as Ben says, facts will win over. Yeah, exactly. So when you've gotten into debates about this, do you find you have a trick or any gimmick to get people to agree? Like if you say, well, wait a minute, Atlanta and Ferguson and Chicago, they all have Democratic mayors. Does that help? Is there something? Because that's what people are always asking me for. What are the tricks to get people to listen?
Really, when you're talking to somebody who has the mind for change, it's possible for them to say, okay, I'll grant you that, and we could kind of move. For lack of term, move the goalposts a little bit from there. But when they are stuck in their mindset, they will find a way to circle back around to make everything about white supremacy and the such. So if you say that, somebody who's a millionaire who plays basketball or football, they've made it out, well, they're going to say, well, that's just because white supremacy is allowing them to get out. It's like, you can't get anywhere with that.
Right. If white supremacy existed, or at least in the numbers they'd like, I definitely would have been in the NBA, because I got a pretty decent jump shot. So the other thing that I wanted to hit on before we wrap up is you talked about the meme generation as one of the things you wanted to talk about, and I think it fits perfectly within what you're talking about. So you're a gamer and you're a politics guy. What does that mean to you, the meme generation?
So the meme generation to me is the generation that's grown up, the millennials who don't think that you should take everything so serious. Now, there are some aspects where you should take things seriously. However, when you're online, you're on Twitter, and when somebody sends you a meme of, I've been sent memes. I've been called everything from Sambo to Uncle Tom to Grease Monkey to Jungle Bunny, whatever you name it, I've been called it. But it doesn't get to me. I don't allow it to get to me. I laugh it off. I've been sent memes. I send memes to other people. And that's what I'm trying to get to, is that you shouldn't be so soft-hearted about these things. Now, when it gets into family, I don't really like to touch into other people's family. But if it's just mano a mano, that's where I like to stick.
Yeah, and I've been trying to push this idea, this meme out there, because when I go to schools, I'll ask the crowd sometimes, I'll be like, do you guys think the alt-right is really a bunch of white supremacists, or do you think they're just, shit posters and Pepe and Kekistan, and they're trying to upset everybody because it's fun? And almost everyone says that. And it's like, if the mainstream doesn't get on board that, the disconnect's just going to get wider.
Yes, it's very true. I've really gotten onto the meme generation, following people like Sargon of Akkad, which you've had on, and plenty of others. I've been on Poll, Half Chan, 8chan, all these places where people put their memes, and it's all just shit posting. It's not people who want to try to ruin people's life or destroy people because they have a different skin color or anything. It's, if you allow them to get under your skin, they will continue to dig. It's not because they want to hurt you. It's because you're just weak-willed. And that's how I look at it.
Yeah, well, I totally hear you. And it's been a pleasure talking to you. And what do you think you want to do? Are you trying to figure that out right now? Because you're pretty recently out of the Air Force?
Yeah, I'm going to college right now. I plan to try to go in to be a lawyer. Nice. And I know a lot of people say that I should probably avoid this, but I want to go into politics. I want to try to help people out, because I see it, but I don't want to be dragged into that how I look at it, like the Black Caucus, where they have this large amount of wealth, but they're not really helping out their constituents like they say they are. I don't want to be part of that.
All right. Well, here's the deal. If you go into politics, I promise you I will, if you make an actual candidacy and you're running for something, your first interview will be right here.
Awesome. I appreciate it, Dave.
All right. I'm talking to Ines in Sweden. Ines, how are you?
I'm doing all right. How are you, Dave?
I'm doing well. I'm looking forward to talking to you. You have really a great story that gets to so much of the heart of what people are talking about these days. You are a Syrian immigrant into Sweden. So tell me a little bit about growing up. When did you move to Sweden and that whole thing?
I came to Sweden when I was about 3 months old. So I've lived here my whole life.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I grew up in a predominantly immigrant area. So I've grown up with the culture of immigrants. So at home, I would learn one set of values, and in school, I would learn another.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that a lot of people talk about, that the immigrants aren't integrating in a certain way. So tell me a little bit about just your home life and that first, and then we'll talk about the bigger society stuff.
Well, yeah, I'm lucky actually. My parents came to Sweden, and they both started working, and they studied and started working, and they both have a full-time job. Education has always been very important in my household, but still there was these conservative values we had from our homeland. Not really equal rights for women in the household and such things. And really, my friends around me had the same set of values at their home, some worse than others.
Yeah.
So
I know that, so one of the things that people talk about when they're talking about this is the difference maybe between culture and religion. So when you talk about like those conservative things related to women or maybe gay people or whatever else, was that kind of religious based for you, or was it just culturally based, meaning just from the culture of Syria, not necessarily having to do with Islam?
No, it was actually from religion, but those things, when people say it's culture, they forget that religion plays a huge role in the culture of in the Middle East.
Sure.
It's really the same thing there.
Yeah. So as an immigrant, and a darker skinned person growing up in Sweden, where there's a lot of very light skinned people. What was that like for you?
Actually, I always say that, and that's not maybe not the experience of everyone here in Sweden, but I've never met a right-wing racist in Sweden. I've met a left-wing that will treat me like I'm less because I'm darker skinned and I need help and such things. But I've never met someone that will be bigoted against me because of my darker skin. Sweden is really open, and yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating because we hear that these right-wing groups are appearing and using racism and all this stuff. But when you talk, so you haven't seen that. But tell me a little bit more about the left-wing racism. I think that's what we've been referring to as the soft bigotry of low expectations. That these people mean well, but thus they start treating you differently.
Exactly, and it's really the subtle things. They will not put you as high standards as other people. They will always. You'll see it, for example, in schools in Sweden, in predominantly immigrant areas, you'll see kids as young as 8 years old wearing the hijab, and the left wing won't criticize it because it's their culture. But if their children were forced to wear the hijab, they would be against it totally.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Are you? You're only 18, so you're young, and you're obviously incredibly bright and outspoken and all that stuff. Do you feel that you can express these contrary views within your community and within bigger society?
I think it's important to say that in the Middle East it would be much harder. I have free speech in Sweden. It's really that it's self-censorship here. People won't speak up and will accuse you of racism and sexism if you speak up against those things. I will speak up, for example, in school, where most of the people there will be left-wing, and I will express ideas that doesn't align with everyone else, and I will be able to say it, and there won't be any problems. But people will have the idea that you're still racist, or sometimes I won't always align with the feminist values of my school, and they will think it's because I'm from an immigrant background, and people from there won't be feminist.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the height of absurdity in a lot of ways, because you are a woman, you are educated, you are an immigrant, all of these things, and it's like they're ironically treating you as the less than. So when you explain this to your friends, are you able to get these points across? I mean, are you winning any battles in your own little experience?
Actually, I go in a school where there are very bright people, and I love my school, and there is some radical feminists there and such things. But when I share videos on Facebook, and we'll have discussions over lunch there, we will exchange ideas sometimes, and sometimes it will get heated. Sometimes we will actually get to a middle ground, and we'll see where we're coming from.
Yeah.
But I think that in general in Swedish society that is not happening.
Yeah. What do you do for fun? What's an 18-year-old doing for fun in Sweden?
Well, I'm
besides fighting for
here.
free speech and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I actually will read books. I will be on the internet. I will go out with friends. Normal 18 years old stuff.
Yeah. When you see people, or maybe you don't see it, but in America we have this sort of strange view of Sweden right now, because it's become sort of the hotbed of this, where people are saying, they're afraid to say what they think. I get a lot of email from Sweden from people saying that the political correctness has gone kind of crazy. Do you feel like it's going to be okay that people like you and your voices are getting heard enough?
I'm really seeing an awakening here in Sweden. More and more people are really starting to understand that there is something wrong happening. We saw during the beginning of the refugee crisis, the elites, the media, the mainstream media, and the politicians all said, "Well, it's all fine and dandy. There's no problems." And then we saw alternative media sites and populist parties starting to speak about this, and they became more and more popular. Today, you'll see if someone speaks up about it, the media will still call them racist. The politicians will still turn against them, but in general, people will stand with them.
Yeah. So what do you think is the best way for all of these countries, not just Sweden, but for countries that take in families like yours? And it sounds like you had a little bit of a unique experience in a very positive way because your parents were so focused on education and work and all that. What would you say to the societies? What's the best way to integrate these people? For people that do want these societies to function properly and have great young people like you, like what do you think is the best way?
We need to integrate them by showing them what our values are. There's this idea that all cultures are equal, and I really don't agree with that. If you have a culture that oppresses women, it's lesser than the Western values we have here, and we need to spread them. One thing that is important is that we don't force them to not say what they want. They should be able to hold any ideas they want, but in school we should really try to spread our values, and because you'll see immigrants at home being pushed more towards their values than in school. So I think that is one thing. The other thing is not to have as much segregation as we have today. Try to make it so that immigrant children go in the same school as Swedes, because, for example, the school I went to was like 95% immigrant. The only Swedes we saw there were the teachers.
Do you have any family that's still in Syria now?
Yeah, there are still a few people, but I think they are living in camps, and some of them are in Jordan. And actually, some of my family were able to come here, and I'm really thankful for that.
Wow, and that's what the real immigrant experience is, because I'm sure you're now able to share with them all the things that you love about living in Sweden.
Exactly, and I find it really, I really think that countries that are like Sweden should help countries that are having a hard time now. But what we did during 2015, it was unplanned, and what we saw is the people that came were actually economic migrants, not refugees. And we didn't talk honestly about it. But I think the core idea of trying to help other people, here or there, is very important.
Yeah, well, I think you're just such a wonderful example of how this is supposed to be. You came at a very young age from another place. You've embraced your culture. You're obviously incredibly bright. I think maybe you could host this show for me sometime if I go on vacation. What do you think?
We'll see.
I'll let you know how much we pay off camera. I'll let you know. All right, I am on with Akira in Cambodia, and for certain security purposes, we're going to do this one just with audio. You were in a small number of people, about 10 people or so, that had requested to come on and didn't want to show their face. Obviously, we're sensitive to that, and that's how we're going to do it. So that's my little preamble. Akira, thanks for doing this, and how are you?
I'm doing all right. How about you?
I'm good. So tell me a little bit about your situation. Now, obviously, there are certain security concerns. We don't have to get too much into why you would not want your face shown, but just tell me a little bit about yourself to start. Let's do that first.
Well, it's a bit confusing to try and explain exactly who I am but essentially, I have a British mother, a half British mother, and she's Japanese. And I was born in the U.S. and so forgive the accent, I guess you could say. And the reason I'm in Cambodia is because I have a Cambodian wife, and met her in the U.S. and then came over to Cambodia with her. And but regarding my situation, the reason I'm not showing my face is a lot of over here. I mean, over in the States, I actually used to live in Los Angeles, so I'm very familiar with that area.
All right.
But I'm over here in Cambodia. There's two kinds of free speech that you don't have. Essentially, you have. I mean, over in America, you can criticize the government all you want. Now, some people would say, well, no, you can't do that. But then, you actually can, and you don't have to worry about any repercussions. Just fairly recently over here, about a minute from where I live, a political, I guess you could say critic, was just shot dead right in the middle of a gas station. He just went to get fuel, and he was gunned down in the middle of wherever he was, and then he's gone. And so that was recently. But unfortunately, I don't actually criticize the government that often. But the kind of free speech that the second kind of free speech that we don't really have over here is the kind of free speech that that I really see is just completely disappearing in the States. I mean, I haven't lived in the States for almost 10 years now, but when I see these people, such as these Antifa fascists, going around to recently the Berkeley riots, and they're just trying to shut somebody down because they don't like what they're saying. That's what's happened to me in the past, is that if you want to talk about real racism or real something that people don't agree with you, we've had our business literally burned down to the ground, and there's no such thing as insurance that'll compensate you. So for when it's burned down, it's gone. And when it's looted, and when you have people literally showing up to your gates, threatening you, saying, "You're not us. You're not one of us. We're going to kill you, and we're going to take everything away from you." It really puts it into perspective of what kind of, when you can say, oh, somebody said something mean on Twitter, or somebody said something mean on Facebook, but it's not the same thing as somebody coming to your doorstep with weapons saying, we're going to kill you because you're not us, or we don't like what you say because. And so that's the second kind of free speech. And this is why I wanted to actually come on and speak out, is because I said to myself, well, if I don't stand up, and you have people that are always afraid to stand up, then the thugs win. And if they win, then the country degrades. I mean, people, for the record, Cambodia is not in Africa. I know it sounds like Somalia or Cambodia or something. Right. But a lot of people, but it's in Southeast Asia. It's right next to Vietnam. But it's one of the poorest countries in the world that's not at war right now. Its minimum wage is $5 a day. And so, but yet still gas is still $3.50 a gallon. And so if you look at it, and you could say, well, is it that because the people are not working hard, or is it because the government's keeping us down? And I say, look, I'm a business owner. I want to start a business here. I want to provide better services here. But I can't, because if I invest more money, I risk it all being taken away because people don't like what I say, or they don't like the way I look. So.
Yeah. All right. So let's pause there. So you've given a lot there, not only explaining obviously the situation in Cambodia, but also that you see the beginnings of this happening in America, where you used to live. So what piece of you? I understand you said you married a woman from Cambodia, but I suspect there must be a piece of you that would say, we've got to get out of here. I need to be able to express myself properly, and perhaps more importantly, own a business and not have all of those other risks and things.
Yeah, a lot of me says I really do want. I'm one of those people where I don't know if it's evolutionarily speaking, it doesn't make much sense. I like to stand up for what's right, but I don't like to remain silent on issues where I feel there's something wrong here, And so a lot of me does want to go and to have, I guess you could say, to really be in a place that there is free speech. I do like to, I guess you could say that I would like to move to a different country. But at the same time, some of me feels like it's, what's better? Should I just go to a different country and start my own business and do something for myself and try and speak out there? Or where would I make more of a difference? And I also have my family over here. And if they don't understand what free speech is, if they don't understand, how great, I know people sometimes they say, "Oh, America's not great." You go to wars with all sorts of different countries, and I say like it's not the point. If you look at the society in America, I mean, I can tell you hands down, it's fantastic. Like I say, I used to live in Los Angeles, and Los Angeles has its problems, I know, but
the traffic can be quite difficult here.
Yeah. Oh, it's nothing compared to here. You should just recently. I have a commute of 7 kilometers from where I live, and it takes me about 2 hours to get to where I want to be. And
oh my God!
So it's 4 miles, and so I have a subcompact car, and it gets 10 miles to the gallon because I can't go faster than 2 miles an hour, and so.
Wow. So for people that know nothing about Cambodia, because it's obviously not a place that we're very focused on generally here in the States. What kind of government actually does Cambodia have, and how much impact do the people have on the people that are ruling them?
Truth be told, it's hard to summarize this when there's but I'll try and summarize it the best that I can from my perspective. The government has been labeled largely as, I'm not going to say totalitarian, but it's strong arm. So if there are protests going on, the military police, not just your regular policemen and, with the spinning lights on the car coming, I mean, the actual militaries with AK-47, they'll show up and they will use force to quiet the people down. Now, they don't just gun them down. I mean, I know Cambodia's probably the only thing people know about here is the genocides that happened at the hands of the Khmer Rouge, but it's not like that anymore. It's not totalitarian. You're not going to be shot for just saying something that you don't know, that the government in general doesn't like. I know I just mentioned the political dissident who was gunned down, but again, it's an iffy situation. There's a ton of corruption over here at the same time, and you can't really say that was from the dictator himself or the however you want to. He's called the prime minister, but people call him dictator. It's very complicated, just like how it's complicated in the U.S. But it's strong arm, but it's relatively free. For example, if I wanted to start my business, I could, and so I did with my wife. But it was essentially it was the people that was what made it very difficult for me to keep things going, because we're not Cambodians by race. And so that's what I tried to hit on when I said we don't have two types of free speech over here, is because one, yes, legally we are allowed to do certain things, but at the same time, because of the people, because of a certain, and to be clear, not all Cambodians are this way. I mean, a good proportion are wonderful people. And but there's that certain size of mob, and then once they form, it makes things almost impossible to do. Just like how, if you wanted to open a coffee shop, let's say in the Berkeley area, and you wanted to, I don't know, have some different opinions than the norm. I mean, how long is it until someone that's going to go bash your windows in? So
well, in Berkeley, it could happen within about 5 minutes. But I see your point, even even beyond that. All right, so we have to wrap up here. But I thought a fitting last question in a situation like this would be how important and integral to your life is the internet in a situation like this, where as a human, you can't fully express everything. How important is your ability to connect with other people, do things like this, and chat about free speech or video chat with people or whatever else, when in your day-to-day life, it's obviously a little more tenuous?
For me, the internet is absolutely essential. And when I had written into your staff, I had said I wanted to try and restore hope with the millennial generation. Obviously, we can't get to every point, but it does tie into that, because so many people of my generation, I just celebrated my birthday yesterday, and I turned 29, so not that old.
Happy birthday!
But so many people of my generation. Oh, hey, thank you. And so many people of my generation, they lose hope. I mean, there's statistics everywhere where people are saying, "Oh, I have no future. What am I going to do? I can't be a superstar. I can't be a sports star. I can't do whatever it is they think they can't do." And I'd say to them, look, I'm over here in a country where if you work 8 hours a day, your wage is 63 cents an hour. I'm in a country where I live next to an open sewer, and yet I'm here talking to you back in LA over the internet. and I have all the potential in the world to do anything I want, and so does my family, because all the information exists out there. The ability to talk to other people of like minds, it exists. I mean, essentially, all of the potential in the world exists right in front of you. But when you don't understand that it's there, it's hard to have hope. And like I say, in answer to your question, the internet is absolutely essential for people, and I think for restoring hope in this generation, because it's that road that nobody knows is there. And it's that road that we need to start walking as millennials, that because we've been taught we need to be a certain way. We don't have to be a certain way. There's so many opportunities now. Like I said, I'm in one of the poorest countries in the world, and I'm talking to you. If that's not amazing, I don't know what is, and I genuinely mean that.
Well, you've given me a little hope in that people are trying to find some answers and connect all over the place, and I think we can amplify this to get out to a lot of the type of people that you'd love to hear it. So I thank you, and I wish you the best of luck out there. All right, I'm on with Tibor in Hungary. Tibor, how are you?
Thank you very much. Thank you for letting me on the show. I'm fine. How are you?
I'm good. So of all the 20 people that I'm going to talk to you, I actually know you the best because you're one of the winners of our Patreon golden ticket, and you're at the $100 level. So that means that for the last 6 months or so, or 8 months, maybe even longer, you've been part of the group chats, the small group chats that I do with 10 people, and I've gotten to know you pretty well. And I always say in the group chat, you're one of the people that actually make it really good because you're in a different part of Europe. You have very specific thoughts on things. You hate the regressives and all that stuff. So I've teed you up. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am almost 40. I'm born in the communist era, and I lived like 11 years of my childhood in the communist era. And I have difficulties loving in the regressive left and all that sounds or smells Marxist. That's way. I'm currently a project manager. Recently joined the Mensa Hungarica, and I'm trying to find a way to understand better what's happening and how can I help the things happening here in Hungary and possibly even further.
What actually was it like growing up under communism?
Well, 11 years, and it was the communism light, if I can say that. It was called the Gulag communism. You can eat, but nothing else, nothing much more. Not too much brand to use, not too much things to enjoy. For example, if we had a cartoon from America or from Western Europe, it was a curiosum. It was really a good thing to have.
Right.
And just by stepping into the era when the Soviet Union was falling apart, and Hungary has become independent. That was a really eye-opening experience from my childhood as well. Because suddenly Christianity was not that sinful, suddenly we could do whatever we want. But I have to admit that the countryside when I was a child, when I was school, it looks like that my teachers did not even believe that we can speak now, we can do whatever we want, because I was... how can I say it in English? I did not prepare for the word. You know, the redneck, like a young patriot thing. Mm-hmm. We still did it 2 years after the Soviet Union's collapse.
Right. So that's fascinating to me, that you're in a communist society, and I get it, you were still young, 11, but that even after things changed, that chill factor of not even being able to realize that you can talk and speak up and talk about ideas and read certain books and all that stuff. How long, do the remnants of that still exist today, like for an older generation?
Maybe the very old generation. Maybe there is a layer in society who wishes it back for some reason, because the light capitalism that we enjoy now requires you a lot of effort to put into your future. For example, in a socialist country, you get everything from the government. Your job is secured. If you're not doing any job, you will be taken to jail, for example. Mm-hmm. It has a special name for that, like KMK. It's a very dangerous work avoider.
Right.
So now you have to work. Now you have to, being an entrepreneur, you have to take odds to make money. My generation, I think my generation is the best in Hungary so far, not because I'm part of it, but we realize that we have to do things to get better. For example, I started literally of nothing, including with my wife, and we are living a very good life now. We have two kids, third is incoming, so everything is great. But the regressive left started to take on our youth. The universities, they are not so bad shape like in the United States, but it's getting there. It's getting very bad.
Yeah. So what are you doing, or what are people in the public that do get this? What are they doing to push back on that kind of stuff? Well, I know what you're doing because you're doing this with me right now.
Yes, and other things, but we don't have time to discuss that. But we have activists on the regressive side, and we have very passive anti-regressives, if I can say that. The regressives are very loud, very annoying. They have lots of money, tons of money they have to spend. For example, the three biggest major media outlets are in their hands. So everything happens that's outrageous, you will have publicity. Even bigger than you imagine. I don't know if you are familiar with the CU scandal here.
No, I'm not.
Central European University scandal. I'm surprised because our regressive media tells that everybody's outraged. Even America is outraged about this scandal.
I don't think I know what it is. What is it?
Central European University is a Soros-founded university in Hungary. It's an independent outside university which teaches certain classes, certain degrees they are selling, and the government is just stand opposed to that very harshly.
So they're selling what, like social justice 101 kind of thing?
Oh, I can tell you their entire platform. Let me tell you, the three most useful in our Hungarian economy might be the history, philosophy, and economic analyst. These kind of useful, but listen to this: women's and gender studies, minority politics, political science, public policy, environmental policy and management. The useful stuff that you are used to. Right. For the States. So they are just outraged that we try to close this university, and even Georgia had a protest against it. They even tried to frame a Berlin protest and set it up like it was against the CU. But it was just a pro-EU protest. Some guy who lives in Berlin just stand there with some signs for the pro-CU propaganda, and they took the photos and they promoted that thousands in Berlin were protested against the CU law.
Huh. Well, if your media over there is telling you that we're hearing about this, it somehow has gotten over my head, but maybe somebody knows about it. So I know you know your politics kind of inside out, but a couple of the things that you wanted to talk to me about. First off, you wanted to talk a little bit about atheism. I've gotten to know you pretty well. I didn't know you were an atheist. I'm obviously fine with that. But what is it that you wanted to say about atheism?
Well, I'm an atheist. But I think I'm natural born atheist from my very early youth. Not because of communism, just it did not resonate with me. The Catholic teachings did not affect me. The Bible was too fairy tale-like, and I never could grab on that. But although when I started to dig in deep, what causes these problems today in our society, and why is Europe is falling so fast into the pit? I had to dig into deeper, and every time I found the answer, that is the main reason is the abandonment of the religion, and I wanted to understand it more better, a bit deeper, why they are saying that, because something that absolutely not necessity for me for existence. I wanted to know why is that so big deal. Yeah. And I don't want to rob too many time of you, but after my digging, I did not finish, but I just finished with the New Testament and with Christianity and with some prominent skeptic secular people, that I think we did a huge mistake abandoning Christianity, and atheism today does a lot of damage.
It's a pretty fascinating point, so I want people to really understand that. You're saying that you, as an atheist, as a non-believer, did some research and you saw that the abandonment of some of the religious values has actually been a net bad for society. I've had a couple people on my show, I think somebody like Dennis Prager has mentioned that concept, that the further we get away from these ideas, that it's bad for society. Now, I'm a secularist and a non-believer myself, but I think it's a fascinating concept.
I like Dennis Prager. I mean, he's a wonderful person, but he always provides a religious answer for these questions. I tried to find a secular answer for this. I tried to find something that I can present to my atheist friends or the atheist community to grab on. And I found the most appealing point is the communication problem. Because atheists are using secular philosophical reasoning, which requires 105, 110 IQ average. And you know that by using this, we just exclude 60% of the population, just by talking reason and trying to use abstract thoughts.
Oh God, that's pretty depressing, don't you think?
Yes, but I think we can build a bridge. For example, I think atheists can consume the Bible if we do some things like the image of God and the concept of afterlife. We can just replace that and focus on the Christianity's main focus, which is individualism and the betterment of self. Nothing else. Everything else is just fairy tale, and that's it.
I'm with you, brother. All right, so final thought. We only have about a minute left. You had mentioned that you also wanted to talk about just generally IQ and how that relates to society.
Oh, man.
And you mentioned you're also in Mensa, although I think you said you're leaving. Why are you leaving Mensa?
I'm leaving Mensa because I did not found what I came for. I thought that I will talk with people about what is IQ exactly, because it's not intelligence. It's a property just like muscles, height, or anything other property of a human can have, but it's not intelligence. I talked like one or two prominent men from the Mensa Hungary who agreed with me that IQ is just the thought processing and the short-term memory. A lot of other attributes contribute to the intelligence for a human being, and the most important nobody speaks about. It's the thought processing method. How do you think? How do you acquire knowledge? IQ is just a very good attribute to achieve that, but it's not everything. You need medium-term memory, long-term memory, and the most importantly is the operating system of your brain, which is quite corrupted if you use an ideology far left. If you understand.
Well, I feel like that's a perfect way to end this with you, and I've enjoyed getting to know you when we're doing our group chats, and it's always nice to talk to somebody that's clear in their thinking and has a certain set of beliefs, so I'm glad that everybody else is going to get to know you as well. All right, I'm with Michael in New Zealand. Michael, how's it going?
Hey, very good, thanks, Dave. How you doing?
Good. So New Zealand, whenever I see New Zealand, what pops into my head is lamb chops, rack of lamb leg, lamb shoulder. Is there a lamb shoulder? I'm not sure. What's going on with the lamb in New Zealand?
Well, they tell me it's pretty good, but to be honest, I have a feeling they export all the really good stuff to you guys, and then we kind of get the leftovers. But it's still not so bad.
Oh, that would be very depressing. You mean you got to come to me to get the good lamb, even though they're raising it and it's pastured out there?
Yeah, apparently so.
Oh, that's very depressing. Well, Trader Joe's is taking all your good lamb then, because they're doing something well. So, all right, there's a whole bunch that I want to talk to you about. Now, by looking at you, you are a white male, a privileged white male. Apparently, you're sick of being called a privileged white male, and I think it gets to the heart of a lot of what I've been talking about with different people, and a lot of what I do with this show. You have a really interesting childhood and what you came from to where you are now, which is why you don't want to be thought of as a privileged white male. Take it away.
Yeah, so I'm originally from the UK. I grew up in a very poor area, so a very poor family, in a place that a lot of people would now describe as a ghetto, so where a lot of migrants would tend to live. So I was one of only sort of 5 white kids in my class, so I was actually a racial minority as well. But my difficult childhood was also that I was sexually abused for about 2 years when I was about 10 to 12 years old. So that's something that's sort of left a mark on me, but hasn't defined me. And I've sort of gone on to work very hard to become quite a successful person. And so obviously I tend to see myself as having overcome difficulties rather than being a recipient of privilege.
Yeah, so it's that bizarre position where if someone was just to look at you, they would think one thing, and the truth is you came from not much financially, as you said, came from the projects, basically, survived child abuse, but you don't look at yourself as the victim. Did you have a moment where you realized that ideology, that way of looking at life was not going to fly for you?
Yeah, I started sort of trying to have these conversations when I first started trying to speak about male victims, and I realized a lot of the ideologies that people practiced were kind of excluding certain people. And the thing that I realized was that people tend to use the word victim as if it's a status, so that it's something they cling to that defines them, rather than just being something in the past that happened to you, which is how I prefer to look at it.
Mm-hmm. And what actually brought you to New Zealand? Why did you leave the UK?
Just a chance at something new. I left when I was 18 years old. Wasn't really doing much with my life, and I wasn't sure where it was going. And this just seemed like a great place to have a new start. And despite its other shortcomings, for the most part, it's a really free place where pretty much anyone can accomplish what they want if they put their mind to it.
Yeah, so I love that because you're someone that actually grabbed a hold of their life and are doing something good with it. And there's a couple interesting things here. So you started a Facebook page to talk about the very issues that you care about. It's called Logic, Empathy, Honesty. And you talk about rational dissent and using logic and reason and all of that stuff. Have you had success building a community? Do you have the frustrations of being a creator and a curator now?
Mostly it's going really well. So I've only got about 600 followers, but we tend to get some good discussions every now and then. The main thing about my page, though, is that I don't just try to attract people to agree with me. It's about people coming to disagree, so we can kind of just discuss any topic. So I share my biases openly, and I let people into my opinions, but I don't try to force everyone to think the same way. And I think a lot of people really appreciate that.
Yeah. What's the state of politics and free speech and all that in New Zealand? I mean, I think people really have very little knowledge about New Zealand. I think it goes to lamb. And I read a story about a month ago that you guys were like selling passports. You could basically get citizenship for like 800 grand or something. Now it sounds like maybe it's a little more than that. But I know a lot of rich people are moving there. James Cameron, I think, just bought a lot of land there. A bunch of other people. What's going on there politically?
Yeah, so the political stuff in New Zealand is kind of mostly based on that at the moment. So there's a lot of foreign investment happening, people buying a lot of land and houses in particular. And so a big part of the conversation in this year's election is about what they're calling a housing crisis, which I think a lot of people are worried about, just not being able to have affordable houses. People who've lived here their whole lives just can't buy into the market. Our average house price in our capital city just surpassed $1 million, so that's a pretty big deal. But mostly Kiwis, New Zealanders are pretty politically apathetic. They're quite passive and don't tend to get involved. And now that we're starting to see a lot of the run over from the things in America about free speech and some of the more radical extreme left and right perspectives, people are really starting to wake up to that and have conversations. And I think we're really starting to see a lot more people waking up here.
Yeah. What's the general thought about America these days and Trumpism and our crazy political system? Do you guys feel, and I know you can only speak for yourself, but as a general concept, do you feel that we're leaking a lot of stuff all over you?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of that. I think in general, people do think that America has a big impact on, especially politics in the West. But there's definitely a lot of feeling, at least where I'm in Wellington, which is our capital city, which is, as cities tend to be, very left-leaning. Trump isn't considered to be a very popular or great candidate for America, and his effects on the world are not that great. But again, you do tend to have a lot of people, well, not many that will outright support Trump. I don't myself. That do tend to get involved in the arguments where bad arguments are being presented and try to be a bit more of a moderate voice, which is good to see.
Yeah, so let's circle back to something that we discussed briefly for a second. One of the things that you wanted to talk about was rape victims with the wrong opinions, which is sort of a hard phrase to wrap your brain around. What do you mean by that?
Sure. So that comes down to, I guess, how I said earlier, how I started trying to talk about my experiences and be a part of the conversation. Something that I discovered quite quickly was that there are certain subsets of people, I think probably quite a small minority, that see male rape victims as basically a threat to their own existence and to their own narrative, which is that rape is something perpetrated by men against women. And obviously it is a very big problem for women, but men don't tend to have a chance to talk about it. And one thing I found is that whenever I tried to, you get two kinds of attacks from people. One was in essentially saying that by having this conversation, you're undermining the female conversation, and therefore you're attacking women. Obviously,
which, all right, so that one's completely bananas. I can understand people say it, but that really makes no sense. By talking about what happened to you, it doesn't mean you're diminishing other people's. Sorry, go ahead. What's the second one?
Exactly, yeah. And so the second one, I think, is a little bit more almost insidious in that they try to frame it as that males can't talk about this because of male culture or toxic masculinity, which implies that males are inherently the problem. But I've never, in my entire experience, been shut down by other men for trying to talk about problems. It's almost always radical third-wave feminists that will, like I say, just shout me down and call me names, which I think implies that the problem is coming from these big ideologies that are really starting to turn into these static, almost religions, rather than the individuals and people just trying to talk about their own experiences.
Yeah. Do you think that there is a counter movement growing to that when you talk about radical third wave feminism? And obviously I've talked about this with a whole bunch of people, starting really with Christina Hoff Sommers, but that there's a counter movement, sort of this, I know that there's a men's rights movement, but maybe a movement that isn't necessarily based in logic and reason, but actually just anger. Like someone like you, if you weren't logical and reasonable, you would end up going to anger here and going to, being angry at women and all that other stuff for silencing you. Do you see that, like a split there on the men's rights side?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So when I started having these conversations, and something I try to do in general is that I get involved in every side of the debate and try to understand every point of view. And so I did spend a lot of time in the men's rights activism areas for quite a while, and eventually moved away from that because there is a lot of that just anger and hatred. And obviously you can understand where that comes from when people are having their experiences shouted down and not being allowed to be part of the conversation. You understand why they get angry. But I think it's important that we don't get just stuck in the same rhetoric that we see from the other side, and we try and just have an open debate and just put our experiences out there and let everyone come to their own conclusions.
Yeah, what's interesting about it is that when you talk about men's rights or any of this stuff, it's almost toxic in the way that we view men. Like, for example, I was speaking at a college last week and a man came up and asked a question about men's rights, and he did seem a little angry and anxious and whatever, and I could feel people kind of laughing at him before he even got the question out. And I tried to be as respectful as possible because I don't want people to double down on their anger and all that. But even there, in a free speech place where everyone really is respectful, there's just this weird feeling around it.
Yeah, I think it comes back to just people with their own biases, and especially with men's rights, it's really easy to imagine men as these stoic and passive individuals, which might even account for a large number, but it doesn't account for the ones that are really vulnerable in society and that might need to talk about their problems. And especially when you come to talking about men's rights in groups of people, even free speech rallies and that kind, is that there's always going to be this perpetual leftover ideology from what's the prevailing narrative that feminism and essentially that females are the victims in society and that men are pretty much always the oppressors.
Yeah, well, it's pretty clear to me that you know your stuff and you're passionate about it and you're putting your life's experience into action, which of course is great. You're also working on your first book, which has a great title, Liberty Redefined: How Fascism is Returning to the West. So we got about a minute left. Just give me the idea, the genesis of what's going on there.
So basically, I just wanted to go through, like I say, the multifaceted arguments that exist on so many of these topics that are being undermined today. So rather than trying to tell a story, I just want to address most of the common beliefs in society that I think are not being discussed openly, and just give another perspective that perhaps people haven't considered.
Nice. All right. Well, listen, here's the deal. You get that thing published, I'll put you back on the show. How about that?
That sounds great. Thank you.